We live our lives on software, right? It's how we get around, how we manage our money, how we connect with people. But have you ever stopped to think about what it takes to make sure all that code actually works? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on software development and find out why so many huge, expensive projects just completely crash and burn. And I want to start with a number that honestly, it's pretty staggering.
53%. According to a government study, that's how many U.S. government information systems projects were just abandoned. Not delayed, not over budget, abandoned before they were even finished. Benita, that number is it's wild. How does that even happen? How do more than half of these massive projects just fail? It's a huge multi-billion-dollar question, Alex. And as you can see, it's not just a government problem. This happens everywhere. These big failures are usually a mix of things, shifting goals, bad planning from the start, but a massive piece of the puzzle, and really the key to avoiding this kind of disaster, is a serious, disciplined approach to something called software testing.
Right. So many of these failures and the insane price tags that come with them boil down to a fundamental misunderstanding of what it takes to build something that works. And that brings us right to the heart of what we're talking about today, what testing really is.
Okay, so when you break it down like that, testing is basically about finding bugs before anyone else does. Simple enough, right? A bug hunt? Well, that's definitely a huge part of it, for sure. But it goes so much deeper than that. That definition is a great starting point, but in the real world, professional testing is all about answering two very different, very fundamental questions. See, at the heart of any successful project, you have this core philosophy that's built around these two ideas. Getting this right is often the difference between launching a successful product and becoming another one of those billion-dollar statistics. Let's break down what those two questions are. This right here is such a subtle but absolutely critical distinction. On one hand, you have verification. That's asking, are we building the product right? In other words, does the code match the blueprints? Do we follow the plan? But then you have validation, which asks a much more important question. Are we building the right product? Does this thing actually solve the problem for the person who's going to use it? Because you can follow the blueprints perfectly and still build something nobody wants or needs. Testing has to cover both. Wow, that quote really hits home. So testing isn't about proving a program is perfect, which is impossible anyway. It's about finding problems to build confidence and lower the risk that something will go wrong. It's about managing uncertainty. So if that's the mindset, where does this whole testing process actually fit into the bigger picture of building software? Exactly. And to really get where it fits, you have to look at the whole journey. Testing isn't something you just sprinkle on at the end and hope for the best. It's a planned, integral phase in a very structured process that we call the Software Development Lifecycle, or SDLC for short. Okay, the easiest way to think about this is to imagine building a house. First, you have planning. That's deciding you need a new house. Analysis is when you figure out, how many bedrooms, what style, that kind of thing. Design is the architect drawing up the actual blueprints. Implementation, that's the crew actually building the house, brick by brick. And then finally, you have testing. This is the inspection phase, checking the plumbing, the electrical, the foundation, everything to make sure the house is solid and safe before anyone moves in. Okay, so that diagram makes the testing phase look like one big final step. But it sounds like there's got to be more to it than just a single inspection at the very end.
You got it. It's not one step at all. That's a super common misconception. It's better to think of it less like a single checkpoint and more like peeling back the layers of an onion.
So we've got to peel that onion. The whole process is designed to start small with the tiniest little building blocks of the software, and then it expands outward until you're looking at the entire system working together. It's a very logical, step-by-step progression.
So at a high level, you can really break testing down into three big stages. First up is development testing. This is done by the engineers as they're actually writing the code. Then you have release testing, where a totally separate team gives the finished version a really hard look before it's sent out. And finally, you get to user testing. This is where real people get their hands on it to see how it holds up in the real world. So for now, let's just zoom in on that first stage, development testing.
Okay, so what's actually happening inside that development testing stage? What are the layers?
It builds up exactly like our house analogy. You start with unit testing. That's like checking every single brick and every 2x4 to make sure it's not flawed. Then you have component testing. That's putting the bricks together to build a wall and making sure the wall itself is strong. And finally, there's system testing. That's when the whole house is assembled and you're checking to see if the plumbing, electrical, and all the rooms work together like they're supposed to.
That sounds incredibly thorough. You've got unit, component, system. I mean, by the end of that, the development team has really put the software through its paces. So at that point, it's got to be ready to ship, right?
Almost, but not quite, because you can build a system that is technically perfect, passes every single one of those internal tests with flying colors, and it can still be a total failure. Why? Because the final and, frankly, the most important hurdle is the user. This is where we get to something called acceptance testing.
This is the moment of truth. It's the final sign-off. Remember when we talked about validation, making sure you're building the right product? This is it. This is where the actual customer gets their hands on it and decides, yes, this solves my problem and it's ready for us to use. It's their official stamp of approval. So this is the final checkpoint before it goes live. We started with this crazy 53% failure rate, and now we've walked through this incredibly layered process, all the way from checking one tiny piece of code to getting that final yes or no from the user. It seems so comprehensive, but it does make me wonder.
And that, right there, is the ultimate question, isn't it? Given that testing can only find problems, not prove they don't exist, and that what users want and need is changing all the time, maybe a perfectly tested system isn't even a real thing. Maybe testing isn't a destination you reach. Maybe it's a constant, ongoing process of making sure the software we build continues to be fit for its purpose, whatever that may be tomorrow.